Put God first.
Your presence in their lives gives them validation.
Our children don't need us to be superheroes.
If you do these things, the next generation and the generations that follow will live in a world far better than the one we have today.
Men, stand up, be fathers.
Hey guys, it's Mark, your host and founder of The Inspired Legacy, where we seek to equip and inspire you to unleash your inner lion and reveal your true purpose as spiritual leaders in your home. Well, I just got off the phone with Ben Courson. He is a best-selling author, a TV and radio personality, international speaker, founder of Hope Generation, and the senior pastor at Applegate Christian Fellowship. He's also the author of the brand new book, Flirting With Darkness, Building Hope in the Face of Depression. And right now, as I'm recording this, it's National Suicide Prevention Week. Guys, you've heard me talk about depression and suicide on this show before. It's a growing problem. In fact, Ben shared a stat with me today that there's a suicide in our country almost every 40 seconds. That's really hard for me to wrap my brain around. And experts are seeing suicide skyrocket among middle-aged fathers, more than almost any other segment of our society. Yet we don't hear a lot of people talking about this. I think it's one of those things that society would rather brush under the rug, quite honestly. But as men, that's not what we can do. We've got to look difficult problems in the eye and deal with them head on, which is why this conversation and the tools that Ben provides in his new book are so critical right now. And he isn't just pulling this stuff out of thin air. Ben has a personal history with depression and suicidal thoughts, and the tactics that he has for us, which he covers in the book, are ones that he has personally used to overcome his depression. And I think they're going to be valuable tools that every guy ought to have in his own toolbox. Because at some point, guys, whether we want to admit it or not, we're going to go through crap in life, right? So it's a good idea that we have a strong faith to lean on during those times, but it's also a good idea to have some simple weapons in our toolbox and at our disposal that we can use to engage the enemy. Because make no mistake, there is an enemy, and he wants to see us crumble. So guys, I want you to open your minds right now. Set aside any preconceived notions that depression, anxiety, or seeking help when it comes to your mental health is some form of weakness, because that is a lie. Set those feelings aside and really dial in to this message that Ben has to share with you. Ben, welcome to the show.
Mark, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked.
Absolutely, man. Like we were talking off air, I love the energy that you bring, and I'm excited for you guys to hear, the listeners, that is, to hear Ben's story. So let's start there. Ben, I know you're a younger guy, and for as young as you are, you've done and achieved a whole heck of a lot. So let's kind of go down the list. What have you got going on?
So yeah, right now I have a TV show that is on 19 networks in 180 countries. It's called Hope Generation, which is also a radio show on 484 stations nationally. And I have, I'm really excited about the best-selling book, Optimus Fits, which came out a year and a half ago. And I have this new book, Flirting With Darkness. And so now I just travel around, living on airplanes, kind of speaking the message of hope to the world, because that's what I'm super passionate about. I want people to find hope.
Well, and it comes through in your voice for sure. And you've lived through a season of life where you desperately needed hope. And we're going to touch on that in a little bit, but let's talk about Hope Generation. Give us kind of the 411 of Hope Generation.
Yeah, so Hope Generation is all about creating hope for our generation as an aggregate, but it's also a pun and it's a play on words. Generation can mean creation. So Hope Generation is not just hope for a generation. It's also meant to generate hope, like generating hope in an individual's heart. And so, yeah, basically on YouTube, for example, we have over 600 videos just devoted to giving people hope.
Good grief, man. That's a lot of content.
Yeah, and hundreds of podcast episodes too. So we believe anything worth doing is worth overdoing, as the Navy SEALs say.
Well, I think the topic of hope is such an important one, especially today. You turn on the news and it just seems like you just feel this overwhelming sense that there's not a lot of hope out there when it comes to politics and race and faith and the Christian church. It just feels like hope is something that we lack. And so tell me a little bit about how Hope Generation hopes to kind of fill that gap.
Well, I was just thinking about that, Mark, about like you read the news last night, even where I live in Oregon, it's just the world's on fire. There's something like
Yeah.
36 wildfires raging throughout Oregon as we speak. A couple of my friends even had to evacuate their houses. And you read that in the news, it's like, how much bad news can we take? Like over the last 4 months, more people have died than any 4 month period in American history. And then like more people have died from COVID, over 180,000 than all the Americans that have died in the Vietnam War. Then of course you have racism, you have civil unrest. It's just like so brutal. But here's what you have to remember: that bad news sells and bad news sticks. The reason why news agencies often lead with bad news stories is because neurologically, bad news sticks to the brain like Velcro, whereas good news falls through the brain like eggs through a nonstick pan, or like through like water through a sieve. And in order to assimilate or process good news, you have to meditate on it for 15 seconds. Otherwise, you can't really grasp the beauty that's happening. So basically, Hope Generation is an attempt to infiltrate the media with good news. And that's what it's all about.
Man, I really love the fact that you bring science into this conversation because, hope, I think a lot of people on the surface would think, oh, it's touchy-feely, that's nice. But when you actually bring some hard data and science into it, it's kind of hard to refute. I like that.
I think if anything, I get criticized for doing too much science, but no matter how much I might get critiqued for that, like I love the data, I love research, I love science. So I'm always bringing science into my messages and really wanting to hawk the data because I'm passionate about it.
Well, when you think about it, I think it's a great way to kind of crack the code with those who maybe put science above their creator. I know a lot of people, an entire generation really, who they treat and they look at science as God. And I think that the more data and hard science you can introduce to those folks, you can kind of open their eyes to the fact that, oh, maybe this hope and this faith stuff and this God stuff maybe there's more to it.
Well, a lot of people think that God and science are at war, which is utterly absurd. I mean,
I agree.
700 years ago, William of Ockham and Roger Bacon invented the scientific method. They were monks. So like Christians invented science. That's true. Christians actually invented science. So I think it's really sad when we're going backwards 700-800 years later. And now we think Christianity's at war with science. It's not meant to be that way.
So talk a little bit more about this ruminating on good news for 15 minutes or 15 seconds. Like, is there like a practical, because in my mind, that's a tactic that seems like it would be really easy to do, but we get caught up in the day to day. And I think personally, I would just forget to do it. So are there some like practical ways that you can like integrate that into your thought process, your daily grind, so that it becomes more of a habit and more of a rhythm?
Yeah, Paul actually gave us a good tactic in the book of Philippians where he talks about meditation. Now, a lot of people think meditation's Eastern mysticism or like a homeopathic mental cure. But really what we have to remember is Eastern meditation is about emptying your mind. It's like a negativism of a nirvana of nothingness and like sort of a placid abyss. But Hebrew meditation, remember Paul was a Jew, is about filling your mind. And so what he said we're to meditate on or fill our mind with is whatever things are true, noble, lovely, just, pure, virtuous, and praiseworthy. So it's constantly rewiring our brain to meditate on the beautiful things. So one of the things I like to do is when I'm exploring, me and my friends really like to explore. So like when we're exploring a forest and we find a waterfall, there have been, like I remember I would say like, we have to pause right now and stop and stare at this waterfall for 15 seconds. And it's actually really empowering. I know it might sound like a life hack, but I really do believe in neuroplasticity. Daniel Amend, who was a psychiatrist who did 83,000 brain scans over a 22-year career, found that the common denominator between all his brain scans is that the brain can change. That's what he found. The brain can change.
Oh, absolutely.
And so there's a plasticity neurologically in our brain that proves to be more malleable than we might have previously suspected. So we can rewire our brain, reframe our pain, retrain our psychological constitution, cranial package, and cerebral gray matter, and actually through deliberately and conscientiously meditating on the lovely things, our brain will start to assimilate more hope. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I just have the wrong psychological equipment. Like I inherited my genetic, spiral ladder, 50% from my mom, 50% from my dad. So I'm just basically a byproduct of my parents biologically. But actually, what's really interesting is there's this verse in the Old Testament in the Bible where Ezekiel rebukes the people because they kept saying, our teeth are set on edge because our fathers ate sour grapes. And that was a proverbial way of saying, we're the way we are because of our parents. And Ezekiel said, don't say that anymore. I know it's very Freudian to say that. And I know there are definitely biological components to depression. But at the end of the day, what magnetic resonance imaging is showing us through MRIs, CAT scans, and brain scans is that, in fact, the brain can change. And through rote and repetitious thinking, we can actually build muscle memory in our brains so that our thoughts are driven toward hope and escape the grooves of despair, depression, and negativity.
Yeah, I totally buy into that. I know there's studies out there that have proven that young people, for example, the more time they spend in front of the TV playing video games, that it can actually physically rewire their brains. So I totally buy into the fact that, that same principle can be used, in an opposite way to kind of rewire towards good rather than something bad. Do you think that age plays a factor into it? Not to dive too deep into the science realm, but does it get harder to rewire our brains to think, hopefully, the older we get?
Well, your brain is still forming between somewhere around 18 to 25. That's why I think a lot of people when they're 18 to 25 have an identity crisis where they're trying to find out, like, who am I? Who am I?
Yeah.
And so I think the younger we can start retraining our brain, the better. But at the same time, I always like to tell people it's never too late. You might have snow on the rooftop, but you can have fire in the furnace. Like, there's no reason why you can't start to open your mind, because keep an open mind, because the mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work unless it's open. And honestly, having a closed mind, the older we get, is actually what hampers science. For example, Jonas Hanway, when he introduced the umbrella to the UK, people were hurling insults at him when he walked with an umbrella over his head down the street. I mean, imagine how weird that would be the first time you ever saw a guy with an umbrella. When planes, trains, automobiles, computers were first introduced, they were met with great resistance. When Copernicus and Galileo found that it's not a geocentric, but a whole heliocentric solar system, that the Earth revolves around the sun, not the other way around, the Catholic Church actually imprisoned and tried to get Galileo to recant. If you look at even psychotropic medication, a lot of people are saying, oh, antidepressants are so evil, but they were doing that with chloroform too. When James Simpson, who was a Christian, invented chloroform, that was the single greatest invention for, removing pain medically from people's lives during surgery, because chloroform was an early form of an anesthetic. So could you imagine doing triple bypass heart surgery without any anesthesia? That'd be pretty brutal. Word. And yet there were people who protested anesthesia and chloroform, because they said, well, hey, pain purges the soul, so you shouldn't have chloroform. And so basically, whenever something new is being introduced, Jesus said you can't put new wine into old wineskins, meaning our brains we don't allow them to be elastic enough to learn new things. And that's why the older I get, the more open I want to be to new ideas. Now, of course, I want to stay true to my convictions. There are certain things I believed my entire life, which is beautiful. But at the same time, I always want to progress and learn as my age progresses as well.
Man, you just hit me with a lot of stuff there. I was going to ask you, if you saw anything in the world today that people might be pushing back on, but then you mentioned psychotropic. Is that what you said? Psychotropic drugs? Yep,
exactly. Like SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, medication, basically. I know there is a lot of controversy around antidepressants.
But I feel like it's maybe slowly changing, or maybe it's just me.
I agree with you. And I think it takes a while to remove the stigma and taboo from it. Like I think a lot of people assume that if you're depressed, you're weak, failing to realize that Calvin Coolidge led the nation through the roaring 20s, and he was depressed when his son died, our 30th president. You look at Ernest Hemingway, who was suicidally depressed. David Foster Wallace, suicidally depressed. Carrie Fisher, who played Princess Leia, was bipolar. Winston Churchill was stalked by the black dog of depression. Abraham Lincoln walked alone through the woods with a shotgun because he had so much melancholia. So you look at Buzz Aldrin, who walked in space for 5 hours and 37 minutes, second guy on the moon. He too struggled with depression. So I think we have to remove the stigma and taboo around people who struggle with depression. And those who feel the need to take antidepressants, there should be no judgment there. And I think slowly but surely the taboo is lifting. And my goal is to fight for mental health, even in the church. I'm a big believer in amalgamating the homeopathy of the East with the pharmacology of the West, that in your body, like, I'm not a Christian scientist, which means I don't believe medicine is bad. Like, I believe God can use prayers and pills. I believe he can use miracles and medicine. There's this really funny story in the Bible where Jesus heals a guy with spit, like he heals a blind guy with spit in the story. Yeah. Because back then, the Roman historian Tacitus said that the emperor Vespasian healed someone with his spit because spit was considered to be medicine. And so Jesus was, as it were, putting his stamp of approval on medicine. It was as if he was saying miracles and medicine can work hand in hand. And so while there is a lot of complications with antidepressants, like, don't get me wrong, we're only in the pioneering stages. Some people think they're only placebos. The prevailing theory is that selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors cause the presynaptic neurons to send the serotonin across the synapses to the postsynaptic neuron and doesn't reabsorb the serotonin because serotonin is a feel-good chemical. That's the prevailing theory. But really, there is controversy around it. My whole argument, though, is that those who need professional help should not be judged because professional help has truly been life-saving for a lot of people. And God uses miracles and medicine.
Well, absolutely. And I think that I agree. We are in the pioneering stages and probably will be for a while of the pharmaceutical side of things. But I think the larger point is people are opening their hearts and their minds and their eyes to the fact that mental health is a real thing and that we do need to take it seriously. And like you said a minute ago, it is not a sign of weakness. And I think that that is something that men have struggled with for a long time. They look at their mental health, and if they struggle with it, that they think that it's a sign of weakness. And it's because the world has told us that it is for so long, and it's kind of ingrained in us. And I think that we are slowly starting to see society as a whole kind of get over that hurdle and take a hard look at mental health the same way you would your physical health. And I think that pharmaceuticals is a part of that. I think that faith is a big part of that. And I think that Hope Generation can play a big part of lifting people's spirits and getting through those valleys, so to speak. But I do think that the medical and the pharmaceutical side of things is something that we can't turn a blind eye to either. So we've segued into your book. This is, as we are recording this is National Suicide Prevention Week. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about this topic. Like I mentioned, it's an important one. The rates of suicide amongst middle-aged fathers, which is what I am, continues to grow. So it's a problem. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think the work that you're doing with Hope Generation is key. This book, Flirting with Darkness, that just came out yesterday, is that right?
Yeah, it just came out yesterday.
It's going to be a huge resource for people out there. So tell us about this book. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, so I, in Flirting with Darkness, look at depression through 4 lenses. Number 1, I tell my personal story. Number 2, I look at it through the lens of history. Number 3, I look at it through the lens of the Bible. And number 4, I look at it through the lens of science. And I haven't quite seen a book that's addressed depression from those 4 angles yet. And so that's what I'm really trying to do to help heal people from depression, just as God healed me from depression.
Right. So let's talk about that. You bring a lot of street cred to this conversation. So tell us, what's your history with depression?
Yeah, so I got diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. My counselor said, Ben, you have one of the most difficult cases of depression I've ever had to treat.
Jeez.
And a lot of that, some of it that might have been, just purely psychosomatic or mental or biological or whatever, but a lot of it was really environmental. So my brother died, my sister died in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
My dad's first wife died. I went through 10 years of suicide ideation and depression. I remember.
How old were you at that point?
from 18 to 28
Okay.
is when it really hit hard. And then it came back again after my brother passed away, and God has healed me again. He's been so good. But basically, even after an 8-year relationship, I was blindsided by heartbreak romantically. I mean, just kind of in a lot of different ways, I got hit from all sides. I have this stalker who basically tracks my speaking schedule and protests me at events. So like this last week, I was doing a digital event in Florida, and he goes to the street and is protesting so loud that he actually caused a car accident. He's been doing it to my family since I was a little kid. It's pretty gnarly. So
That's odd.
basically, yeah, it's crazy. And you just go through stuff and you start to think maybe the universe is hostile and inimical and it's not a healthy place to be. And that was a big cause of my depression. So my whole thing is, if God could heal me of depression, he can heal anybody.
Amen, man. So do you feel like you're truly healed, or do you still battle with it?
No, I feel like I'm healed, but when it starts to creep in, I know how to deal with it. That's why I lay out in the book 11 weapons to defeat the Dark Lord of Depression. They're just 11 practical things you can do, 11 practical handles that will help you to keep depression at bay. And that's been huge and life-saving for me, that arsenal of weapons. And that's what I want to arm people to the teeth with.
No, I think that's what people need. They need to fill their toolbox with tools for all sorts of things. And I think this is, like we've been talking about, it's a huge issue. And for guys to have a resource and tools in their tool belt that they can turn to and know how to use, I think it's going to go a long, long way. So are there one or two practical takeaways that you can give guys listening that maybe dealing with depression or maybe even suicidal thoughts? Because I know that it's common, it's prevalent. So what do you got for those guys?
Yeah, well, I want to do one practical one and one more like ethereal one.
Okay.
So I'll start with the ethereal one, and that's prayer walks. Scientific research is showing us that when you talk to God about your hopes, fears, and dreams, it has the same effect on your brain as therapy. Isn't that wild?
That is crazy.
So that's what scientific research shows, that if you talk to God about your hopes, fears, and dreams, it has the same effect on your brain as therapy. So for example, if you talk intentionally to a loving God, it activates the frontal lobe of your brain into its highest intellectual capacity, and you build richer, thicker gray matter in your prefrontal cortex, the area of your brain responsible for creative thinking. You have more blood flow to your anterior cingulate cortex, the place of empathy and compassion in your brain, because you don't put someone on your hit list, you put on your prayer list. And you also have less activity or blood flow to your amygdala, which is the rat brain where fear, anger, stress, high blood pressure are located. So it's wild. Like, what you think about God and how you meditate on him and pray to him can actually change the chemistry of your brain, which is super crazy. And I found that, like, just going on walks with God, talking to him about my hopes, talking to him about my fears, talking to him about my dreams has been integral to my mental health. So that's one thing. The second thing I would say is endorphins. Right now, I'm going through Navy SEAL training with my friend, Chad Williams. He wrote a great book called Seal of God. He was SEAL Team 1 and SEAL Team 7. And I have him put me through Navy SEAL team training as sort of a way, amongst other things, to sublimate and perform transference in my brain and body partnership. So a lot of people, when they're depressed, they cut themselves. And one of the reasons they do this, they want to not only is it like a bid for attention, like a sincere cry for help, but it also is a way to sublimate and perform transference on your body from your mind. Like, I'm trying to get my pain out of my mind, so I'm going to inflict pain on my body. So what I'm trying to do is actually flip that and say, yes, we should perform pain on our body, but not through cutting ourselves. Let's do it through exercise. So instead of it being harmful, it's actually helpful. And so that's why, like, I literally go through SEAL training with my friend, because I want to push my body to its limits and transfer the pain from my mind to my body. And what research has shown us is the reason exercise is so mentally healing and clears the cobwebs from your brain is because you release endorphins when you exercise, which is a natural painkiller in your body, similar to the drug morphine, actually. And it activates opioid receptors in your brain to start to bring down your pain levels. So that's why research has shown us that a 40-minute jog has the same effect on your body as an antidepressant. Isn't that wild?
That is crazy.
So basically, yeah, I have a very kind of ethereal one in prayer walks, but also a very practical one in just releasing endorphins. those are 2 out of the 11 that God has used to heal me.
Dude, those are really good. And I think those are, on one hand, extremely simple to integrate into our lives. On the other hand, however, and I can speak from experience, and I think you'll agree with me on this, that Satan wants us to be busy, right? He wants us to be too busy for our families, too busy for the things that are good for us physically, mentally, emotionally. And I think that when we are caught up in our daily grind, it's really easy to skip those prayer walks or that time alone with God. It's really easy to think, I'm too tired to go to the gym today. Or maybe don't go to the gym at all, ever. You know what I mean? And so I think that you've hit the nail on the head, that these are 2 really good ways to fight depression and anxiety and make ourselves feel better and healthier. But Satan is going to do everything that he can to keep us from doing them. Am I right?
Well, I think it's interesting that you point that out, because I've heard it said that BUSY is an acronym for being under Satan's yoke.
Oh.
Like BUSY, being under Satan's yoke. Sometimes that can be what busyness is. The word devil actually is a judicial term, and it means a prosecuting attorney. That's why it says that the enemy is accusing us day and night before the throne. And I think that the enemy is always accusing us and condemning us and making us feel guilty. And so to distract our minds, we'll be busy about all the wrong stuff, and we'll miss these very simple qualia that we can integrate into our lives to get the healing we need. So I'm really glad you pointed that out, Mark.
Yeah, well, it's something that I struggle with all the time. And it's hard to escape sometimes. But yeah, Satan's going to continue to do whatever he can to disrupt our lives and make it difficult for us to do the things that we need to do for ourselves and for our faith walk. So thank you for sharing that with the audience. Ben, I know you're on a time limit here, and I want to get you out on time. I'm curious real quick, tell us about your other book, Optimus Fits. I've heard of that title, but I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. Oh, it just makes me so happy thinking about it, because Optimus Fits means optimistic misfit. It's a made up word.
Yeah.
And, depression is the norm in our society. Like once every 40 seconds, someone commits suicide, 123 suicides a day. In 2017, it was the 2nd leading cause of death in my generation. I mean, that's insane.
That is insane.
The 2nd leading cause of death. So you have social activists trying to cure AIDS and medical scientists trying to cure cancer, but we need sacred optimists who are going to cure suicide, because it's one of the top 10 leading causes of death. And so I know that Russia is hawking Sputnik 5 as the panacea, cure-all, nepenthe sort of vaccine to the coronavirus and COVID-19. For me, I believe I have the cure to depression, and that's what Optimus Fits is about. It's about learning to be a misfit and rebel against the depression that is the zeitgeist of our culture, but be rebellious in a hopeful, joyful, optimistic, buoyant sense. So Optimus Fits is about igniting a fierce rebellion against the hopelessness of our culture by approaching life with an intense sacred optimism.
Dude, I love it. Man, both of these books they're books that every guy needs on their bookshelf, because like we said earlier, they're tools that we need in our arsenal. And Ben, I want to thank you for the work that you've done with Optimus Fits and this new book, Flirting with Darkness. I would assume both can be attained anywhere books are sold.
Yep. The best way to get them is through Amazon. That's where we're trying to drive people. But yeah, they're available wherever books are sold.
Well, Ben, where can people follow you personally and learn more about what you've got going on, and follow you, your TV show and the Hope Generation and everything that you've got going on?
Yeah, so you can go to hopegen.tv. So if you just type in hopegen.tv, short for Hope Generation, or you can type in Hope Generation to YouTube, and there's our YouTube channel. You can type in Hope Generation to Instagram, and you'll find my Instagram page and Facebook as well. And you can also watch Hope Generation on TV or listen to Hope Generation on the radio. So yeah, basically just look up Hope Generation and you'll find all our stuff.
Awesome, man. Ben, really appreciate your time today.
Mark, I love you. You're a boss. You asked really probing, great questions. And I hope we get to do this again. Let's do a part 2 sometime.
Let's do it, man.
God bless, man.
Guys, I hope you took this message to heart. And if you're struggling right now, if you need hope and encouragement, please check out the Inspired Legacy's private Facebook group. It's full of guys who want nothing but the best for you, and the beautiful part about it being online is it's available 24/7. So no matter if it's day or night, someone is going to be there for you if you need it. And if you took anything away from Ben's message, or if you know somebody who should hear it, please, I'm asking you to share this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you don't miss future shows that touch on these same kinds of topics. All right, guys, that's it for me today. Go ahead and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you're so inclined, so we can get this show in front of more men, because I truly believe that when we work together to lift up fatherhood, we're going to change the world one dad at a time. Until next time, live inspired.